Billy Lucas was 15 years old and growing up in Greensburg, Indiana, where he was brutally bullied by his peers all through middle school, all through high school, because they perceived him to be gay. And he was called a faggot. He was told that God hated him. He was told to go home and kill himself, that he was an embarrassment to his family. And one day he went home and he hanged himself in his grandmother's barn, and his mom found his body. I read about Billy's suicide and was really gutted by it, just really depressed, because I was that 15-year-old kid once, hearing those same things. And I wrote about it from a place of anger. And then I wrote another story, a brief one, about Billy, when the Facebook memorial page that had been created for him by his family was visited by the same kids who had succeeded in bullying Billy Lucas to death. And they went to his Facebook memorial page and they celebrated his death. They called him a faggot again. They said they were glad he was dead, that he deserved to die, that he was in hell. And they said all of these things at this place where his parents would read it, where his siblings would read it, where his friends would read it. It wasn't enough that he was dead. They had to dance on his grave. And I wrote about that from a place of white-hot rage. And there were hundreds of comments on this story that I wrote, and everyone was similarly furious and angry. But one commenter, whose handle, ironically, is Despicable Me, one commenter cut through everyone's rage and said something, wrote something that leapt out at me. She wrote, "I wish I had known you, Billy, and been able to tell you that things get better. Rest in peace." And that phrase leapt out at me because it was really true. You know, I started thinking about it. Things do get better. Things have gotten better for LGBT people in this culture at the macro level, but at the micro level, in our own lives as individuals, things have gotten better. I sat there at my computer thinking about when I came out to my mom and dad at 18. When I told them that I was gay, I wasn't just telling my very Catholic mom and dad. I did this in Rogers Park on the north side of Chicago, where my dad was a Chicago cop and a Catholic deacon, and my mom was a Catholic lay minister, and Ronald Reagan was president. It wasn't an easy coming out situation for me. But when I told my mom and dad I was gay, I wasn't just telling them that I was gay. I wasn't just burdening them with mental images it would take them the summer to recover from. I was telling my Catholic, family-oriented, conservative parents that I would never marry, that I would never have children, and that I could never be a Marine. And here we are, just in the course of my adult life since age 18, and I am married, and I have been with the same man for 20 years. We have a child that we raised together from birth, that we adopted, and now we can both be Marines. We don't want to be Marines, much to the relief of the United States Marine Corps. But gay, lesbian, and bi adults who want to be Marines can serve openly, and gay, lesbian, and bi Marines who are already serving can now serve openly and with dignity. So things indeed have gotten better. My family that had such a problem with my sexuality when I came out to them now loves and accepts and embraces me. I have friends in my life that when I was 15, when I was Billy's age, I never thought I would have. Straight friends who loved me and my gay husband. And colleagues who respected us for what we could do and didn't just judge us because of who we were. So much had gotten so much better. And I just sat there thinking, oh my God, thinking about Billy Lucas, this lovely child who was bullied to death, thinking, oh, if I'd only had 5 minutes with that kid, if I only could have told him that things get better. Because a large part of what a queer kid says when he kills himself or herself is they can't imagine a future with enough joy in it to compensate for the pain that they're in right now. And too many queer kids growing up, marooned in parts of the country where there are no gay adults that they can look up to. There are no queer youth support groups for them, no GSAs in their schools. There is no one there to talk to them. And I was just thinking about this Billy Lucas, and aching, gutted, wished I could have talked to that kid. And then it occurred to me that there were millions of other Billys out there, and I needed to talk to them. But, you know, I do the college speaking circuit. I go to colleges, I do Savage Love Live, I take questions. I suddenly felt I really need to go to middle schools. I really need to go to high schools and talk to these kids. But I would never get an invitation to speak in a middle school or a high school, unless some principal wanted to be fired that day. And more tragically and more importantly, I would never get permission from the kind of parent whose gay son or lesbian daughter or bisexual kid or trans kid most needs to hear from queer adults. And that is the parent who is homophobic or transphobic, who is bullying their own child. Queer kids are at 4 times greater risk of suicide. When their families are hostile, merely hostile, not violent, not throwing them out of the house, not breaking bones, disapproving, hostile, that kid is at 8 times greater risk of suicide. Parental hostility doubles that queer kid's already quadrupled risk of suicide. The queer kid I most needed to talk to, the queer kid who most desperately needs a gay youth support group, is the queer kid with a parent who would never allow them to speak to a gay adult, and a queer kid with a parent who would never give them permission to go to that queer youth support group. And so I just was thinking about Billy, who died, and other Billies out there, and then aching, because what could I do? I would never get an invitation to speak in a school where I might reach one of them, and I would never get permission from that parent to talk to their kid. And it occurred to me, kind of in a flash, on the train to JFK, that in the Twitter, Facebook, YouTube era, I was waiting for permission I no longer goddamn needed or required. That I could make a video, I could speak to LGBT kids, I could upload that to the internet, I could use my column and my podcast and my other media opportunities to encourage other LGBT adults to do the same, and we could bring the queer youth support group to the kid who doesn't have one or isn't allowed to go to one. There are now, at the It Gets Better Project, 150,000 videos created by LGBT adults all over the world. A handful, as you just saw some selections, a handful are by celebrities and politicians, some corporations, including the Chicago Cubs, which if you had told me the Chicago Cubs would be reaching out to queer kids when my dad was dragging me to games against my will when I was 7 years old, I wanted to see a chorus line and we're at the Cubs game, I wouldn't have believed it. There are now 150,000 videos, most by average, ordinary LGBT people, speaking to LGBT kids. And this is really revolutionary. This is not the way it was supposed to be. Sometimes, because so many politicians and celebrities have made videos, the It Gets Better Project feels like this safe thing. It feels like this sort of ooey-gooey, up with people, feel-good movement. And what some people lose sight of is that there is an upraised middle finger at the heart of the It Gets Better Project. There has to be, I created it. Because what the It Gets Better Project said when we launched it to the culture was, we are going to talk as queer adults, we are going to talk to these queer kids whether you like it or not. Whether their parents, preachers, or teachers like it or not, we are going to talk to them, and we are no longer going to let you silence us by accusing us of recruiting or being pedophiles. That we are going to reach out and help these kids by sharing our stories, whether you like it or not. The It Gets Better Project has saved lives, and you don't have to take my word for it. There have been other suicides. LGBT kids are still bullied. The project, we never said, would end bullying or prevent every queer youth suicide. And every additional one breaks my heart. But they don't write newspaper stories about queer kids who haven't killed themselves. I wish they would. They need to help reach other queer kids who are thinking about it. But you don't have to take my word for it. The project has saved lives. You can go to the project and you can look at individual videos on YouTube, and you can see kids who are watching these videos, responding to them in real time, leaving comments, and then you can see the creators of those videos jumping in there and giving those kids what they need, what they lack at home: love, support, perspective. It's a unique situation that bullied queer kids are in. A kid who is bullied because of his race, or her faith, or his class, which is a kind of bullying we rarely acknowledge in the United States of America, goes home to parents and extended family members of the same race, same class, same religion, and they can open up to them about what's being done to them. The queer kid, tragically, all too often goes home to family who are also bullying them, family that disapprove, family that is trying to change them, and communicating to them that they are not loved or accepted for who they are. And so what the It Gets Better Project does is it meets that unique need of the queer kid by giving him that adult perspective. That kid bullied because of his race, even if they don't talk about it, and they should, but even if they don't, they can look at their parents and say, they made it, so can I. The queer kid looks at his parents and cannot make that same leap. So many queer kids who are bullied, they know now, you talk to older gay people, they will tell you that when they were kids, gay men in their 70s, lesbians in their 70s and 80s, when they were children, when they were 15, they thought they were the only one in the world, the only boy on earth who felt this way about other boys. No gay kid grows up thinking that anymore. But a lot of them do think, when they hear about loved and accepted, whole gay people, queer people, that they can't have suffered the way I am suffering or they wouldn't be where they are. That they can't have been bullied like I'm being bullied or they wouldn't have made it. And what the project did was it allowed so many queer adults to open up to these kids about the fact that we were bullied too and we made it, and so can you. When I talk about the project in a sort of meta way, like what it accomplished, it saved lives. We know of one case where somebody who created a video was interacting via email with somebody who had responded to his video, and then the person, the queer kid, confessed to this person that he was having this email dialogue with, that he had taken some pills and was killing himself in the moment. And the person on the other end called the police, tracked the kid down, got the paramedics to his house, and saved his life in real time. So that's the first and most important achievement of the project, was saving lives. And it did. And it continues to. But when you think about the project and sort of a step back at it and look at it, and how did it work and what did it do? I've been an activist for a long time. I was in ACT UP, I was in Queer Nation, I was an activist at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, for queer issues and queer rights, back when there was no protections for queer students on that campus at all. It was the 80s. I was the only openly gay person in my theater department. How'd that happen? But all through my life as an activist, I'm passionate about these things. I will throw my life into it. Something that lefty activists do, is when somebody shows up to your demo who wasn't at the meeting, a lot of lefty activists will be like, well, where were you? You were not at the meeting. You suck. We're happy to have you at our demo, I guess, but if you were really committed to the cause, you would come to the meetings. And this is somebody who's saying this, who actually enjoys meetings, kind of gets off on meetings, like me. So to fault somebody for not coming to the meeting that you enjoyed because they don't do meetings, they don't like them, is idiotic. You should celebrate the fact that they're there at the demo, which is important, to carry a sign, to make a statement. And so what we always talked about in Queer Nation and ACT UP and back in the University of Illinois was, let's identify the doable thing. We're the activists, let's think deeply about this, let's examine the issue, and then let's go to people and say, here's the doable thing, do this. Show up at this time, we will hand you a placard, you can do that. It'll take an hour, you can do it. And that's what the It Gets Better Project was. Terry and I, when we created the It Gets Better Project, what we said was, here, these queer youth suicides, these Billy Lucases, here's something that you can do that'll help. You can sit down in front of a computer, you can talk for 10 minutes, you can upload that video to the website, and you can be part of this movement. And you can reach them. And because so many people did that doable thing, lives have been saved. It turned into a phenomenon, the It Gets Better Project. Because we didn't say, queer youth suicide, it's such a huge issue, there's really nothing that any individual can do. We identified something that any individual could do. And then by all these individuals coming together and doing it, 150,000 videos. It Gets Better projects now, independent in 12 countries, 250 million views. So many individuals poured in, it created this thing that took off and that had worked. Because we, Terry and I, sat at our kitchen table saying, what can be done? And what can other people do? I want to leave you with this story because it best captures what the It Gets Better project achieved. You know, you think about that queer kid who's being bullied by their own parents, who's isolated in a part of the country where there are no services. This is that queer kid. She wrote me at my personal email, at the Savage Love email, to thank Terry and I for creating the It Gets Better project. She's 15 years old. She's growing up in a part of the country that has no services. She's isolated, she's alone, she's a lesbian. Her peers perceive her to be a lesbian, and they're right. And she's being very brutally bullied for being queer. And she went home to her mother and her father, and she came out to them because she didn't think she could get through it on her own. She needed her parents' support. She needed some backup. And her parents did what the religious right advises parents to do when their kids come out to them. Her parents rejected her. The religious right, Tony Perkins, these figures in the Christian right, they advise parents to do what they know doubles that already quadrupled risk for suicide. Her parents did exactly what the Family Research Council advises parents to do. They threatened to throw her out of the house. They threatened to cut her off from all contact with her siblings. They forced her into a reparative therapy program at their church. They made her change. They made her take it back. And she did what so many queer kids under duress have done. She lied to them. She told them what they wanted to hear. She told them what she had no choice but to tell them. She told them that she was wrong, that she was confused, that she wasn't a lesbian, that she was just a tomboy, and Ellen and the International Homosexual Conspiracy had led her to believe that that meant she was a dyke, and she wasn't a lesbian at all. She was totally into guys, and she went home and she put up a poster of Justin Bieber on the wall because that's as close to lesbianism as she can get right now. And she wrote us at the project to thank us. And this is what she said, and I know this letter by heart. I'm watching It Gets Better videos on my phone, in my bed, under the covers, in my bedroom, in my parents' house, in the middle of the night. That's what we did. She has parents who will not allow her to attend the gay youth support group, who will not love her and help her. And we kicked down her parents' door, and we marched up the stairs, all 150,000 plus of us, and we climbed into bed with their daughter, whether they like it or not. And we are talking to her. And she said, it is helping. I am seeing women like me, women whose families reacted the way mine did when they came out, whose families now love and accept them, women who are dykes and gay men and lesbians and bisexuals and trans people who have colleagues who respect them for what they do, friends who love them for who they are, families of their own, partners, and it's giving me hope for my future. That's what the It Gets Better project achieved. We have given her the image that she needs to get through 3 tough years by providing her with that example of other people who suffered the way she is suffering right now, who now live lives of such joy. I have said from the very beginning of the project on CNN and MSNBC that there was an upraised middle finger at the heart of the It Gets Better project. We're going to talk to your kids whether you want us to or not. We're not playing this game anymore where you can accuse us of pedophilia and we will shut up and go away and let you torture these kids to death. But she wrote, this 15-year-old girl who's suffering, wrote something at the end of her letter that changed how I talk about the It Gets Better project. I try not to say anymore, we're going to talk about your kids whether you want us to or not. I try now to say something different because of what she wrote at the end of her letter, which is this. Every day, I get up and I go downstairs and I look at my mother and I look at my father and I love them for who they're going to be in 10 years. And she has that image in her head of parents who can come around, of parents who can love and accept their queer children because she's seen those parents at the It Gets Better project. She has seen videos of queer adults sitting on couches with the parents who rejected and bullied them the same way her parents are rejecting and bullying her right now, who are apologizing to their children for what they did. And she has hope for her parents. So now for her, I try not to say anymore, and I'm out of time, I try not to say anymore, we're going to talk to your kids whether you want us to or not. I try to say, we're going to talk to your queer kids right now, whether you realize you want us to or not. You want us to. You just don't know it yet. One day, you will thank us for loving your kid at a time when you couldn't. And think of that girl out there, 15 years old, and because of the It Gets Better project, she is capable of loving her parents at a time when they are incapable of loving her. Thank you very much.